opening up the medical decision-making screen, we've got tabs for each of the three areas of medical decision-making: diagnosis and management options, amount complexity of data, and then the risk. Well, as far as number of diagnosis and management options, we have the things that are identified in the documentation guidelines: self-limited or minor problems, established diagnoses, whether it's an improved, well-controlled, resolved, an established diagnosis, whether it's not controlled, a new problem with no additional workup, a new problem with additional workup. As you click these, you will see the software tracks what type of number of diagnoses and management options you have established to this point. So if we said, well, this patient's got 2 problems, but they're doing pretty good. They're in for just their routine follow-up. They're doing pretty good. We have a limited diagnosis and management options. But let's say maybe they also had a new problem that we didn't have any additional workup. That's now become an extensive diagnosis and management options. New problem, additional workup planned, we've got that option as well. Now, you are, as the auditor, are still going to have to make these judgments calls about what's additional workup, what's not additional workup. You're going to have to make the judgment call: is this an established problem improved, or is it not improved? This software does not take that ability away from you. It just helps you track what you're counting. One of the elements, or one of the components of dealing with the documentation guidelines, is that if it's a new problem with no additional workup, you only count one of those. Well, although the software allows you to enter more than one, it only counts the one. Let's show you how that works. Let's take away the established problem and the new problem, no additional workup. You can see that if I click 1 here, I've got a moderate decision making. If I click 2 or 3 or 4, I've still got moderate diagnosis and management options, again, because the documentation guidelines say only credit for 1 in this area. So let's say we do have, for this particular established patient that we're following, let's say that we do have 2 established diagnoses. They're doing pretty well, but then they've also got a new complaint today that we're dealing with. And so we've ended up with an extensive amount diagnosis and management options. Then we go to our amount complexity of data, whether it's review and ordering clinical lab tests, whether we've got tests in the radiology section, tests in the CPT medicine section. We've got a notation that the physician discussed tests with the performing physician, independent review of image tracing or specimen, deciding to obtain old records, or reviewing and summarizing old records or history from someone other than the patient. So let's say with this patient, we just had some lab work that the physician has reviewed, so we've got a minimal amount and complexity of data. Our third tab there is the risk, and it's all of the things that we've looked at. The risk tab brings up the 3 areas of risk, whether it's risk for the presenting problem, risk of any diagnostic procedures ordered, or risk of management options selected. So you can see that so far we have a straightforward decision making, because it was based on our diagnosis and management options, and it was based on our amount and complexity of data. Now we're going to enter the risk information. Well, we already said we're dealing with 2 established problems, and this is the point where we say, is it 2 or more stable or chronic illnesses? Do we have mild exacerbation? We end up with moderate risk based on that. We don't have anything that takes us to the high-risk category. We don't have anything with severe exacerbation. We don't have anything that poses a threat to life or bodily function. So we've got moderate risk. We can go on and we can enter the risk of the diagnostic procedures ordered. Maybe we did a lab test, did a venipuncture, and we did a chest x-ray. That's minimal risk there. And then our risk from our management options. We have everything that we're familiar with from our table of risk. Everything from rest and gargles, over-the-counter drugs, prescription drug management, to drug therapy requiring intensive monitoring. So all of those judgment calls that you've had to make before, you'll still make, but now the system will track all of these decisions for you and track it for you. Remember, under the documentation guidelines, the level of risk in any one area determines your risks. So even if I unclicked my moderate there, and I unclicked my minimal there, I'm still going to have moderate risk here, which is going to lead to moderate complexity based on my other areas. We're going to go ahead and click Prescription Drug Management. You can see we've got moderate complexity there. One of the great things I think about Intelicode software is that I can play with my judgment calls. to beat myself up over a judgment call that's not going to affect the ultimate level of service. So I'm debating, is this prescription drug management or isn't it? I can see whether that's really going to affect the level of service pretty quickly at a glance. I can see in this case it didn't matter. My level of service, my decision making was already based on my number of diagnosis and management options. I can see whether to really worry about or really to deal with one particular area if it's not going to make a difference in my level of service. It's also pretty good teaching tool when you're working with physicians to say, if you had just done this one thing, if you had just documented that you did this, it would have made this difference or it wouldn't have made this difference. So there you've got your medical decision making screen. Again, you had diagnosis and management options, you had amount and complexity of data, and then you had a risk. Now we're going to take all of this information and we're going to go to the end screen where we look at our level of service, we make some judgment calls again about medical necessity of our documentation, and we go to the step of generating our reports there.